Yo, B.O.B., it's getting cold out there. You think you're gonna do any crappie fishing this year? Maybe. Crappie, I'm fishing crappie. I'm fishing crappie, winter crappie, I'm fishing crappie, I'm fishing crappie. What's that? I'm fishing crappie, winter crappie, I'm fishing crappie. More like zombies. Oh, winter moving, slothzilla, where do I be? Where'd it be? By the park, G, with the crappie. Where'd the flow be? That's some Tungsten C. That's expensive. Slabs, unlimited. My jig can't go so hard, your crappie wiggling, wiggle, bobby fish. Check your mate. Got every color known, I'm up to date. He's prepared. Crappie, I'm fishing crappie. I'm fishing crappie, winter crappie, I'm fishing crappie, I'm fishing crappie. Say what? I'm fishing crappie, winter crappie, I'm fishing. Say what? So it's getting cold out, and one fish that does bite all winter long, even when the lakes are frozen over, is crappie. And it's kind of become my winter hobby in New York City. It's very sporty. I have more fun with it than going for the bass. And yeah, they're just more active than the other species, and it's something I find very relaxing. And they're at most of the lakes and ponds around New York City. And yeah, I just figure I'd share some information of how I do it, and maybe it'll be helpful to you. Really, all you need is a rod and a reel. You know, the reel could be 1,000 to 500. You could probably get away with something like 2,000 size, but it won't be as much fun as like a 1,000 to 500 that has the correct drag for these fish. Some light line, 6 to 2 pound test. I use braid to fluorocarbon, like braid 8 pound as the main line, and then a 2 pound fluorocarbon leader that's anywhere between 6 to 10 feet long. Pretty long leader. I tie direct, so I'm often just like retying. I like to have a long leader just so I can constantly adjust. But for the hooks, it's anywhere between a size 8, size 6. Pretty small hooks. Size 4 would probably work. I know a lot of people for the larger crappie use a size 4. I use primarily size 6 and size 8. And weight-wise, anywhere between, for the jigs, I use 1/64, 1/32, 1/24, 1/16, in that lighter realm. And usually tungsten, the lead is cheaper, but the tungsten is better for the environment, and also it's a lot more sensitive. I can feel the taps on tungsten way more than on lead, so I use tungsten jigs. But you could use a weighted hook, you could use a circle hook, flies. They aren't too picky. I would say something that they are very picky on is the color and the depth. A lot of times these crappie, they feed looking up, and so you really have to set your jig or your hook at the correct depth for where they are in the water column, and giving that wiggle room with the bottom so that they can, when they're schooled up, they can be looking up at your jig as opposed to looking down. They're not really going to hit it when it's on the bottom floor. So that's something to be aware of. When you're looking for them, it can be a pretty big, game of trying to find where they are. Once you find them, they're a schooling fish, so there'll be a good amount of them once you do find them. But color is one thing that I bring a bunch of options when I'm going for the crappie, because they can be honed in on one color and very shy when it comes to other colors. Naturals will work very well if you're going for a wide range of species at the same time. Like the bass will hit, more natural colors. But for the crappie, I have found that the color range that they see the best and other fish avoid is more like chartreuse, an orange, a pink, greens, anywhere in that kind of color scope. I think the crappie in particular tend to go for and a bass would shy away from. It doesn't mean like the bass won't hit it, but if you're going for crappie, I would stay in that chartreuse orange pink kind of realm. And yeah, I mean that's pretty much it. I think that, you know, the metabolism of these crappie really slows down. You know, they're trying not to burn too many calories in the winter time, so they're moving slow. So I think that the float is really important, and it's really important to use a float, not like your traditional bobber, because you don't want any resistance. If the fish comes up and grabs the jig and tries to move away with it, it's almost like tautog or tautog fishing, where you want them to move away with the jig before you set the hook. And it's a very light tap, and that float is super important, and really finding the right combination of the float size and weight of your jig, that when the fish grabs it, they don't feel too much resistance from up above. You know, you really want them to swim away with it for a second before you set that hook and make sure that they've really grabbed it. Yeah, I hope this was helpful to you. Let me know if you have any questions. I'll answer anything in the comments, as long as it's related to, you know, crappie fishing or fishing in New York City. And just keep in mind, you know, it's all for sport. It's catch and release. It's barbless hooks, single hooks. Avoid those trebles. Have fun. And it's something fun to do, you know, in the winter time when everything else is slow. So get out there, enjoy yourselves, and I'll catch you on the next one. It's definitely a bit overwhelming, you know, this crappie stuff. You can see I've got bags and bags of different lures and stuff with me, and different colored jig heads and colored floats and finesse baits and stuff, and Procure. And honestly, if you were to go for 3 colors, I would say chartreuse, pink, and orange. Those would be the 3 colors that I do the best with crappie on, and as light of a float as you can use, the least resistance in the water as possible. And number 1 would probably chartreuse. So I'm going to start off with, now I'm going to go with the chartreuse head. This is a 132 ounce tungsten head, really small, barbless, 2-pound test. And probably going to start off with I brought something to start off with today that I wanted to use first, which was, it's in here somewhere. No, I brought it. Just this guy, the bling bling with the chartreuse head. Maybe some Procure, but I'm going to start off with no Procure. And a little float, and that's it. Got my little float here. Probably looks like I'm working with about 2 feet of water, 2.5 feet of water. So start off mid water column. Go from there. So I got my float. Yeah, it's 2 to 4 feet in there, I would say. Maybe probably 3 feet. I got my float about that far off the bottom. Maybe about 1.5 feet. Got my barb crushed here. And yeah, this little threadfin shad style bait does very well. You really just want something that has that wiggling tail action, because you think about it, you're going vertical on your presentation. So I would also avoid loop knots, because then your bait's going to be hanging straight down like that. You really want the bait to be hanging upright, so when it sits vertically in the water, you're getting more of a tail action. So sitting downwards like that, you're not going to get any tail action. So with a Palomar knot or an improved clinch knot, something that has a bit of pressure to it, your bait's going to sit vertically in the water, and you're going to get that nice tail action.
Yeah. And the lighter rod you can use, the better. Something that has a lot of bend to it, almost like a trout rod.